I call Timothy Gaston.
Very much, Principal Deputy Speaker. Every time I open a budget bill, it always strikes me that even the most nationalist of MLAs in this House must appreciate our place within the United Kingdom and the financial advantages that brings. We all, myself included, since coming to this House, have made the case for a more appropriate financial settlement for Northern Ireland based on our unique circumstances. I welcome the appointment of Professor Hotham and look forward to what he has to say ahead of the spending review. But all that should not bind us or blind us to the reality of the eye-watering figure contained in Clause 1, Part 2 of this bill. £30,772,659,000. Every time a minister comes to this House and tells us that they have no money for frontline services, that is a figure which every MLA should bear in mind. What did the executive do with its £30,772,659,000? I fear once the maiden instalment stamp is applied, that's where the squander starts. We always have to bear in mind and think to ourselves, did or do we make the best use of that money? Well, my belief going by the budget before us today is that we certainly don't. This executive is set to continue on its course of squandering money on things the people of Northern Ireland see no benefit from. In recent days, I have already highlighted the fact that the money allocated on page 6, line 11, to the Lochs Agency is of questionable value. This is a body which could disappear in the morning and no one would notice, as its functions could be adequately performed by other existing agencies within the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. The truth, of course, is that this place is not interested in finding efficiencies when it comes to the sacred cows of cross-border bodies. No one in this chamber questions the fact that this budget, when cross-referenced with the estimates from last week, will see the Lochs Agency get £44,444,000. No one asks what better use could be made of £44 million than giving it to a body with a poor enforcement record, with almost no prosecutions and an excessive spend in PR and money for scientific work that could be done elsewhere. £44 million would fund between 176 and 220 GPs a year. 200 odd GPs are the Lochs Agency? Well, I know what I would rather the money was spent on. Now let's look at the Department of Health's allocation in this budget. Minister Nesbitt is constantly telling us of the challenging financial position that he faces. I certainly don't dispute that. But when I look at his budget, what do I find? In line 8 on page 20, I discover that our health budget includes money for the Safe Food Safety Promotion Board, an organisation based in County Cork which doesn't employ a single person in Northern Ireland. And yet, one we fund out of the health budget, according to the estimates which we debated last week, to the tune of £2,117,000, enough to fund between 47 and 59 Band 5 nurses. Members, I could go on, but I will concentrate my next remarks on the Assembly Commission. On page 31 of this bill, this is a body which is getting funding of £62.6 million, according to the estimates, so MLAs can award themselves a pay rise and, while doing so, recruit a media monitoring service to type up the transcripts of anyone who dares be critical of this Assembly on the Nolan Show and other different shows. What would Northern Ireland do with £62.6 million if we didn't have an Assembly? Well, you could get over 2,000 full-time classroom assistants. Let's think of it. 90 MLAs and all that goes with us, or a couple of 1,000 classroom assistants. I know what parents would choose. I want to spend a short time, Principal Deputy Speaker, focusing on a few issues related to the Executive Office. As being a member of the TEO Committee, that's the department that I've been able to probe a little more into. I want to get the Finance Minister's view on how some of the money for ending violence against women and girls is currently being spent. This is the flagship policy of the TEO referenced in the Executive Office spend on page 29 and line 13. Yet, when we in the committee drill down into how that money is being spent, we find that a lot of it is simply being doled out to councils. Bodies which have a limited role at best in stopping violence against women and girls. The committee has asked for all councils for the criteria they have awarded the grant money under. From the responses received to date, it's a bit of a scattergun approach, with no individual themes or criteria appears being set by the TEO. Sounds good that we're spending $2 million to tackle this issue, but surely a collective strategy is required to target problem areas and deliver better outcomes going forward. If we take a step back, surely this money would be better spent within the PSNI and perhaps directly within women's sector organisations like Women's Aid, instead of the current approach being taken by the Executive Office. This section of the bill also deals with the money required for redress for historical child abuse. I want to make 2 points about that, Principal Deputy Speaker, if I may. This House previously passed a bill dealing with historical institutional abuse. The committee will shortly begin looking at a bill dealing with mother and baby institutions and Magdalen laundries. It is in stark contrast to the approach of Scotland, which started with the child and looked at how common child abuse was. From there, they sought to address the problem. In Northern Ireland, we are again looking at the buildings in which the abuse happened rather than the child who suffered the abuse. As one expert in this area told me, why should a child who suffered abuse in an institution get redress while the child who suffered abuse in a foster home be excluded? Principal Deputy Speaker, abuse is abuse. The second concern I have about the upcoming bill is that it cannot make the same mistake as the historical institutional abuse bill, which again, unlike this legislation in Scotland, failed to build into any provision for institutions to be required to contribute towards compensating victims for the abuse suffered while in their care. We have a farcical situation at the moment where we have a mediator acting for the Executive Office who apparently has the job of sometimes asking the institutions nicely if they would mind terribly contributing something to the scheme.
Timothy, this is a very sensitive issue. I would just invite you to go back to the process of the budget bill, please. Thank you.
Very much, Principal Deputy Speaker. And just to draw that section of my remarks to a close, across the order we have the same religious institutions that are required by statute to contribute towards compensating victims. And to date in Northern Ireland we don't have that, and that's something which needs to change, and I'm very passionate about that. So I would like to ask the Finance Minister for your assurance that, being the guardian of public money, you will ensure that legislation being brought forward will have that requirement built in. I want to briefly touch on communities in transition funding, which is contained in line 32 and 33 on page 38 of the bill. We are now beginning funding phase 3, and we are still funding the same areas as we did in phase 1, which were identified and data collected in 2016. We are told new areas have been identified, but will only be supported if additional money becomes available. One must ask themselves, when do communities in transition become transitioned? That is a question none of the TEO officials have been able to answer to date. Next topic I want to touch upon is on page 28 and line 38 of the bill, where it is referenced to actions associated with refugee and asylum seeker support and immigration. During the debate and the estimates last week, I highlighted the fact that there were a number of schemes within the scope of the Executive Office relying on sole authority of the Budget Act. 4 of the 10 schemes listed across the entire sector relate to issues associated with migration. They are the full dispersal asylum seeker schemes costing £750,000, the Homes for Ukraine scheme costing £1,965,000, Strategic Migration Partnership Asylum costing £37,000, and the Northern Ireland Refugee Resettlement Scheme costing £200,000, and the Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme and Afghan Relocation Assistance Policy costing £1,750,000. Taken together, those schemes come to a grand total of almost £5.5 million. The Minister's own guidance says that the authority of the Budget Act should be relied only in certain limited circumstances, and normally for expenditure no more than £1.5 million. Yet, here we are today approving a budget which contains more than 3.5 times that figure, explicitly marked for issues related to immigration. Quite apart from all the hidden costs, there is no legislation in place for it. Why is this place, and specifically our First Minister and Deputy First Minister, so anxious to avoid debate on these serious issues caused by immigration? Stormont needs to face the reality that while immigration policy is not devolved, the task of dealing with it falls largely to the Executive Office.
Could you go, Mr. Gaston, could you please go back to the budget debate? We're not having a debate on immigration.
We're not, Madam Principal Deputy
No, I know
Speaker,
that's your point, but
it's an issue that's contained,
no,
and I
I
have
appreciate
referenced
that,
where
excuse
it is.
me, thank you, Timothy. I'm asking you, I love your references and your page numbers and your line numbers, but I'm asking you to get back to the budget debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Principal Deputy Speaker, for acknowledging the work I have put in to ensuring I am within the budget bill and the debate that we have. So just bringing them remarks to a close, one must ask themselves, with all this money that is being spent, is this money well spent? Is it delivering? If you look at the actions that have happened in Ballymena over the weekend, I believe this is a problem, and the money we are pouring in to these strategies simply aren't delivering. So, Madam Principal Deputy Speaker, I'll move on to the next point that I have, and bringing my remarks to a close. I want to raise some observations about the efficiency, or rather lack of efficiency, within the Executive Office. Last week, I commented on the fact that the TO has spent over £126,000 on foreign travel, including flying a civil servant out to brief the First Minister when she was on holiday instead of using video call. I will conclude with some observations about the expenditure of the head of the civil service, something addressed on page 27 and line 24 of the budget. We have a head of the civil service who sails around the US in a private car, and the Deputy First Minister uses another vehicle, while lowly ministers such as Minister Nesbitt and Minister Lyons get by on using public transport. Last week, the newsletter revealed that the head of the civil service's budget has increased from £487,891 in the year before Mrs Brady took up post in 2021, and it now stands at a staggering £848,586 in the last financial year. This is a budget which has within it too much wasted on vanity, duplication and unaccountable bodies. Too little spent on things that matter, and at the centre of it all, this Assembly absorbs millions, while too many working families struggle to access basic services. I began by pointing out that this figure of 30 billion contained within the budget. Now consider this. If the public ever asks, where did our 30 billion go? What will you say as an MLA or minister within this House? Because they won't find the answer in a hospital ward or in a classroom.